Greetings, everyone. This is the first of our tech updates talking about the changes I'm making to Northstar. And today I'm going to talk about the stabilizers, what they are, why we're changing the stabilizers, and how changing the stabilizers somehow went from being a nice, simple project to the number one biggest project that we're doing on the boat, and a huge project, more than I thought I was getting into. But let's get rolling and talk about why. Well, first off, what stabilizers are. If you've been around for a while boating, you may want to skip over this part. But stabilizers are on a boat to help keep the boat right side up on the water. That's important both for safety reasons and comfort. And as long as there's been boats that are going offshore, people have been interested in finding a way to keep them upright because waves are always kind of pushing on the boat and trying to knock it over. And if a boat rolls too much, obviously it can take on water, leading to a really bad day. There's a lot of different ways to stabilize a boat, and I've tried kind of the three most popular ones. On our Nordhavn 68, the boat that we've cruised the most, we had two different forms of stabilization. We had one form for when we were sitting still or at anchor, that we call it, a passive form of stabilization, they call it. And what I called them was flopper stoppers. Imagine two large poles extending from each side of the boat with plates attached to the line. So imagine, they look like fishing poles hanging out of the side of the boat with lines dangling down, and under the water are plates. And as the boat rolls from side to side, the plates create drag and dampen the motion of the boat. The flopper stoppers worked really well. And the best thing about them was that they used no electricity, no fuel. I mean, they just kind of did their own thing. Once deployed, they worked great. They were a pain to set up. Roberta and I had some tricks for how to get them deployed quickly, but it could be a couple of hours the first time of the season you go to set them up. But we also had fin stabilizers. And fin stabilizers are small fins that look like stubby airplane wings that extend from the side of the boat under the water. In fact, looking at boats, you'd never know they're there unless it's very clear water and you can look down and see them. Well, the way they work, probably at some time in your life, you've stuck your hand out a car window and noticed that if you rotate your hand, you can either create lift or descent. Fin stabilizers work that same way. They count on flow of water around them, and they have a computer brain that senses if the boat is upright, and will adjust the roll from side to side based on what it takes to get the boat flat by raising one side or lowering the side. And of course that only works when water is flowing past the fins. In recent years, they've, in the old days, there was really no such thing as at-rest stabilization, meaning using fins while sitting still to keep the boat flat. But people started experimenting with software to see if there was a way to, paddle the fins while sitting still and cause them to stabilize the boat. And there's been success in that, and I'm going to come back to that topic later. For now, I'm going to sidetrack and talk about the other form of stabilization that we had on our most recent boat, a boat named Cygnus. We had a gyro-based stabilization. Let's think of how a top works. Spin a top, it stays upright, and the way gyro stabilization works is that there really is a giant top mounted inside of a ball that sits somewhere on the boat spinning, and it's heavy enough and spinning at enough speed that it forces the boat to stay upright. On Cygnus with our gyro stabilizer, it works so well, both underway and sitting still, that we would even use it at the dock. We were sitting in our slip and there were a lot of wake around, boats going by. It kept us solid. So I loved the gyro stabilization, but there are some downsides. The biggest one is that gyros are big. In order to stabilize an entire boat, on Cygnus it was a 30-ton boat, and the gyro took up a lot of space in the engine room. It sat right in the middle of the engine room, and it was basically a cube, 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot. And on the new boat, where we weigh 150 tons, the biggest gyro that I saw was rated for 110 tons. And we'd probably need 2 of those in order to stabilize our new boat. Another problem with gyros is that they spin up and spin down slow. It would take an hour for the gyro to come up to speed on our boat. And then when we turn it off in the evenings, it would take it a couple of hours just to shut down. And throughout all that time, there would be kind of a constant hum. The engine room was next to our master bedroom, and it was really kind of annoying. So, we would tend not to use the gyro unless it was a fairly rough conditions out there. So gyros are great, but finding space to put them is not easy. I did kind of briefly consider a gyro for North Star, a new boat, but there's just no place to put it. Okay, anyway, speaking of our new boat, the Moonin 90, named North Star. It's an incredible boat, but it was built 25 years ago, or nearly 25 years ago, long before they had really come up with the software for doing at-rest stabilization, or at least I don't think so. But for stabilization and anchor, it relied on a couple of skegs. If you look at the bottom of the boat on North Star, there's 2 long skegs, protrusions that sit under the boat, and those hopefully help stabilize it. And it's important to Roberta and I, the at-rest stabilization, because we spend most of our time sitting at anchor. There's some people that own a boat and constantly got to be on the move. I was just reading about one boat that went 25,000 miles in 10 months, and that's not us. And we like to go someplace and kind of hang out and take our time and spend a lot of time sitting at anchor. And one thing about sitting at anchor, though, is here, currently I'm in the Pacific Northwest, and the inside passage is very protected. There's in fact, on Sans Souci, we never felt the need when we were in the Pacific Northwest for any kind of at-rest stabilization. But this new boat of ours, North Star, we're planning on taking, crazy places, go as far as we can go and in every direction we want to go. And once you get outside of this area, most bays tend to be open to the sea, and there's something called swell, basically waves that'll come into an anchorage, and when the boat starts rocking, it can be really miserable. So we're highly focused on getting a boat that has got good at-rest stabilization. So even before we bought North Star, I knew that we were going to need to do something about the fins, because I could actually look at them on North Star and compare them to what we had on our Nordhavn 68, a much smaller boat, and see that they were smaller. And I also knew that for at-rest stabilization that we would need much bigger fins. It was possible that the skegs that were on North Star, and its extreme weight, I mean, it's a heavy boat, over 150 tons, so it might have been okay at anchor, but I wasn't sure. But I could tell that for underway movement, that just the fins didn't look as good as what I wanted for crossing oceans. So So I decided to upsize the fins even before we bought the boat, and yeah, and that as long as I was doing it, I would get the at-rest stabilization. So currently, the fins on Northstar, or at the time we bought them, were powered by a hydraulic system that was driven by the main engines. I mean, these giant fins that have got a flap got to be powered somehow. And what would happen would be that the main engines would produce, had a pump attached, which would produce the hydraulic power that would then go to the fins. But the problem with that is if there's no engines, there's no power. Meaning that if you're sitting at anchor and you want to flap those fins to provide at-rest stabilization, you can't do it. I dealt with this on our Nordhavn 68 and installed a electrically powered hydraulic power pack to run the fins for when we were sitting still. But the problem is that the power pack is huge and takes up a lot of space in the engine room, and we really didn't have the space to give on this boat. So, basically what you're doing is instead of using a pump from the main engines by using electric fins, you just have electric motors. And I could see that the electric fins are kind of taking over. They're a new technology, but just like cars seem to be transitioning to electric these days, there's some benefits to having electric. And generally, I prefer old technology to new technology. So it's kind of unusual for me to consider the electric fins, but because we cruise in what I call off-grid places, other countries where there may or may not be good mechanics, it's usually better to have tried and true technology on a boat. I felt pretty good about the electric fins, and I thought they'd be reliable. And to make a long story short, I convinced myself to go with electric fins, and I even asked ChatGPT to compare hydraulic and electric fins. And I'll display here, I guess, what ChatGPT said, and you can pause the video if you want to read it. But bottom line was that I went to a company called ABT that makes stabilizer fins and signed up for a set of new fins, and that's when reality started to set in. My initial assumption was that I'd pop off the old fins, pop on the new ones, plug in the electric fins, and go cruising. And that that was kind of wrong. I guess soon after I placed the purchase order, I said, maybe I should verify that the fins or that the hull is strong enough to handle the new fins. So I contacted Vreepak, who originally made the boat, and asked them their opinion, and they sent instructions for how to reinforce the steel hull. So when I took a look at that and started looking at what they had described, I realized this was going to be a bigger deal than just popping off the old fins and putting on the new ones. And then it got even more complicated after shipping the boat from Sweden. When it arrived at the shipyard in the Seattle area, the shipyard, trying to protect me, said that they wanted to have their engineers take a look at the stabilizers and verify that the hull could withstand the forces. There's some good things about electric stabilizers. Actually, one thing I should mention is that the fins can rotate through 360 degrees, which and hydraulic fins can't do it, or at least none that I'm familiar with. That matters in at-rest stabilization because they're paddling the fins to accomplish the at-rest stabilization, and if you're in fins that can't paddle backwards, you can come forward toward the anchor chain. I wanted the electric fins can completely rotate 360 degrees and paddle away from the anchor, and that was important. But there, nothing comes for free. The electric fins have incredible torque. If you compare the hydraulic fins to the electric fins, it's a little like comparing a gas car to an electric car. And I was in a friend's Tesla, and he wanted to show me kind of what the electric motors can do, and floored it. And we were pressed into the seats. I mean, it's a radical difference, the amount of torque, kind of instant power. And the electric fins are like that. I mean, when they decide to move, they're going to move quick. And they're super responsive. And that sudden shifting of the fin, I was, if the hull is not strong enough and structurally reinforced, it could rip apart the bottom of the boat. So it's important to make sure we've got them installed correctly. And the other thing the local engineers did was to want to triple check what Vreepak did. And Vreepak wasn't looking at the boat. They designed the boat 25 years ago and had the set of plans from when it was built, but those are 25-year-old plans that they were working off. And we needed to know that everything matched my boat, and to physically see how they were going to fit these fins onto the boat and verify that 360 motion wasn't going to create problems. And in fact, it kind of did, in that we realized that those big skegs on the bottom of the boat are going to have to get removed. We found plumbing inside of the boat that's going to have to be moved. They're going to have to cut big holes in the side of the boat in order to get the new motors in, and to it's just, I wouldn't say it's become a mess. I would say that it's become a much bigger project than I ever would have dreamed. They're even, because they're going to be welding next to a fuel tank and a water tank, they need to cut into those tanks. It's a big project, but I've got good people on it, and we're being very careful. And that's it. As I'm saying this, that brings you right up to date. And I'll end this edition of the blog to the gentle sounds of torchers and grinders cutting holes in the bottom of my boat. So best wishes all, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.